A Tale of Two Cities, we're talking about Babylon and Jerusalem. Let me see if you can remember any of this. How many times is Babylon mentioned in the Bible? Anybody know? It's the second most mentioned in the Bible. It's mentioned almost 300 times. I think it's 297 times. So almost 300 times. Who was the king that went into Jerusalem and took away Daniel and the three Hebrew children? And there were more, but not many more. Does anybody know the name of that king? I'm sorry, what? No, took them to Babylon. Took Daniel and them to Babylon. Do you remember the name of that king? Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar. Is that what you said? Okay. I thought I heard it, but Nebuchadnezzar. So he took them back, and they lived in Babylon for 70 years. We said that the nation of Israel was divided into two groups. There was the southern tribes and the northern tribes. Where did the southern tribes worship? Anybody know? They worshipped at Jerusalem. Where did the northern tribes? They couldn't worship in Jerusalem, so where would they have to worship? Bethel. They set up worship at Bethel. Do you remember who conquered the northern tribes? The Assyrians, and they never returned. As a matter of fact, we call them the lost tribes of Israel. We don't know what happened to them, but God knows. So there was actually the Babylonians. Nebuchadnezzar actually conquered Jerusalem 3 times. The second time, let's see how to put it. The second time they came and they took away a bunch of people. Does anybody remember the approximate number of people they took out of Jerusalem to go to Babylon? That's a tough one. It was 10,000 people. And you remember they hung their harps on the willow trees and said, "We cannot sing the Lord's song in a strange land." But they took the most skilled people, the builders, the architects, the bricklayers, all the people that had skill, because they were going to build a bunch of buildings. And then the third time Nebuchadnezzar came to Jerusalem, what did he do? He destroyed the temple and the walls. He burnt the city. And so, I don't know if I even mentioned it. Does anybody know which prophet stayed in Jerusalem during that time and preached? Jeremiah. Does anybody know which prophet was taken with the second group into Babylon? Ezekiel. And then, of course, the first taking, what prophet went? Daniel. Isaiah was actually a little before this and predicted some of those things. Cyrus was the king that let them go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. He actually gave money and said, God led me to be the king, and I'm letting the Jews go back home and let them build their temple. And so that's what happened. Now, the Bible talks about Mystery Babylon in Revelation. And that's today's lesson, so you can look at that. Babylon, the mystery religion. There's 3 words to describe the book of Revelation. One is majesty. We see Jesus high and lifted up on the throne. He is majestic. The second one is mystery. There's certain mysteries that we see. And the third one is misery. And that's what the world goes through at the tribulation. But what is Mystery Babylon? And it's more than a city. You remember we said Nimrod started Babylon, and they were going to build a temple that would protect the people. By the way, Nimrod was like the first one to build a wall around a city to protect people. And what they did, usually that they would have watchmen who had a trumpet. It was really not a trumpet. It's like one of these a goat horn or something. And if they saw enemy or danger, they'd blow the trumpet, and that was a sound. Everybody get inside the walls of the city for protection. So he started that. And Nimrod was a mighty hunter. He was the first dictator, really. And so he married a wife. Her name was Semiramis. And Semiramis became pregnant, and Nimrod died. But she liked being the queen. She liked being the head person. So she said that Nimrod was a god, and that she carried in her body the Son of God, and that she was the mother of God. Yes. I'm not sure. There's rumors that maybe she did, but that's a long time ago, so it's hard to get all the details right, But anyway, she likes being in control, and so she gets people to worship her as the mother of God or the queen of heaven. And so you've got this religion of the mother and child. Tammuz was her child, and they used to, I'm getting way off my notes here, but they would actually, they set up a religious system that was a false religion, and she would have priests, and these priests would minister that religion. She had a system where they would come and people would come to them and confess. She learned that if she knew the secrets about people, she's got an advantage over them. It's like blackmail. And if her priests could hear all these confessions, and then she knew about them, she had an advantage over them. So they started the priestly confessions, where they would hear, and then they would tell them, you got to do penance, you got to do things that to make it right. So what happened? Here they got this religion where, and it's more than what I'm telling you. Actually, they began the zodiac, Aquarius, Capricorn, and stuff like that. And all that is of the devil. You don't need to read your horoscope. But that all got started in Babylon. All this pagan, the worship of the sun, the worship of the moon, the worship of the skies, the worship of animals. It was all kinds of idolatry. And so this is the very beginning of idolatry. And so what happens? We said that God confounded their languages, changed their languages. So what happened? People scattered. Chinese people went and they spoke Chinese. The Egyptian people left, and you had all these different nationalities. But they had been taught this religion. So they just transplanted their religion in their new culture. So you had in Egypt, they were doing the same thing. All around in all the different languages that God confounded, they were still worshiping the Queen of Heaven and the Mother of God. And so we see this is happening. So there's always been this religion of the Mother of God religion. Let me give you some verses. We said that the name of the boy was Tammuz. Look at Ezekiel 8:13 and 14. He said also unto me, turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations that they do. Then he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house. This is talking about the temple, which was towards the north. And behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. So the women were weeping. They were. This was a false god. Tammuz was a false god. What was the symbol of Tammuz? It was a T. So many times when they would pray to Tammuz, they would go like this and make a T for Tammuz. The Egyptians made a T with a little loop on top of it, and their priests actually carried around these little T's with a loop on it. And you can see that sometimes. If you look at Egyptian history, you'll see these little T's. So the T represented Tammuz. Now, can you see how that has been associated with Christianity? With the cross. So you have this religion and all these symbols. Semiramis was the queen of heaven, and now when they transplanted this all over the world, they just changed the names. Can anybody tell me in Egypt what was the name of Semiramis, the queen of heaven? What did they call her? Huh? No. It's Isis. You ever heard of Isis? And the child was called Horus. As a matter of fact, I put in there, there's the initials that you see in a lot of religious things, those same initials. In Rome, does anybody know who the Mother of God, the Queen of Heaven was? Her name was Venus. And what was her child's name? Cupid. In Greece, the Mother of God, Queen of Heaven, was called, anybody know her name? It was Aphrodite. And Eros was the son's name. So you see, and really there's more. We could go into all different cultures and languages. So this Mother of God religion, this pagan religion, which really began worshiping the sun. And I talked to you about Ishtar and how it was a spring fertility god, and they worshiped the sun. And in the spring, they would get up early and they would have a service when the sun comes up. That's why I don't like sunrise services. That's only one reason. The other reason, I don't want to get up that early. I know preachers who are like, yeah, we've been having sunrise service for 20 years, so I got to get up at 5 o'clock. But people are used to it. It's a tradition. Some towns, they have a... Now, you say, Brother Carl, are these churches bad? No, if they're worshiping Jesus, and He was resurrected, so they're not bad. But really, the history of it does come out of a pagan culture. A lot of our Christmas traditions, like a Yule, they used to burn a Yule log, and as long as that, however long it took to burn up, that's was how they would worship the winter gods on December 21st, when the winter solstice took place. So all of these things were pagan, and all over the world, the Greeks, the Egyptians. Even in India, in that area, they had their own. And they all had a picture of, like a baby. I could show you pictures. By the way, there's some books you can get. There's one called The Two Babylons by Hyssop. It was written in the mid-1800s. It's a classic. And I had it and let somebody borrow it, and I don't have it anymore. But it'll show pictures of the baby with a halo, and it's like a sun around their head. And the mother also has a sun around. Have you seen those pictures like that? And it's representing the sun god. So, how did that get into the church? Well, in the 3rd century, about the middle of the 300s, the 1st century is where Jesus lived and Paul and all. The 2nd century, our church fathers. The two things that were a challenge to the 2nd century church. One was persecution. They were killing Christians like crazy. And then the other one was heresy in the church. But in the 3rd century, there was a guy named Constantine who was the head of Rome. He was the Caesar of Rome. Christians were growing like crazy, but it was against the law to be a Christian. You could be killed for being a Christian. So what did they do? They met underground, in secret. We may come to that day in America where we might have to meet in secret again. But they met in secret. Well, Constantine was going into a battle. And he says he saw a vision in the sky, and it was a cross. And he said, maybe the Christians are right. Maybe Jesus Christ is God. And so he said, Jesus Christ, if you're God, help me win the battle. Help me win the battle today. Well, he won the battle. So he goes back and he says, Christianity is no longer against the law. You can be a Christian. And so what happened? It began to get popular to be a Christian. Excuse me. Now the guy that followed him, by the way, Constantine did not get baptized till he was about to die. Because there was a teaching in the 3rd century church that after you got baptized, if you sinned, it was no good. That you couldn't sin after you got baptized, you'd be lost. So a lot of people waited till they're about to die to get baptized. Isn't that weird? That's a crazy doctrine. But people have crazy doctrines out there. But after Constantine, here comes a guy, and he says, we're going to make, not only is it legal to be a Christian, but now you've got to be a Christian. It is the state law. Now that is what the devil did to corrupt Christianity. And so what happened? The church at Rome became the great church. Well, what do all these people do? They're worshiping the Mother of God, the Queen of Heaven. So what are they going to do? That's their religion. That's their tradition. They have certain holidays. What are they going to do? Well, they just changed the name. And they said, Mary is now the Queen of Heaven. And Jesus is her son. And so she's the Queen of Heaven. She's like God. And they begin to teach things that the Roman Catholic Church teaches today. The Roman Catholic Church believed that Mary didn't die, that she was ascended up into heaven. They believe that Mary is the intercessor to Jesus. That means you pray to Mary and say, Mary, will you talk to Jesus for me? You know, he'll listen to you. You're his mama. So you talk to him and help me get this job. And there were just all kinds of things I could go into, and I don't want to bash that religion. But what happened? It mixed pagan religion with the Christian religion, and it really messed up the church. It really did. And for about 1,000 years, you had popes that were like dictators, and they were more powerful than kings. And some of them were ruthless. Some of them were very wicked men. Some of the popes killed more Christians than communism. They just wipe them out. If you didn't believe exactly like they told you, they would kill you. And sometimes they would torture you to get you to say you were wrong and the church was right. And so now you've got all this false doctrine in the church. But then you have the Reformation, and I'm getting into history, which one of the leaders of the Reformation was Martin Luther. And he was a Roman Catholic monk, and he saw some of the things they were doing. Like they told him, they said, you need to go to Rome. And they had moved the steps from Jerusalem to Rome, where Pontius Pilate was. And they said, for penance, you need to get on your hands and knees and kiss every step that Jesus walked on. And you had to do all these rituals in order to go to heaven. And Martin Luther got a hold of the Bible because the Roman Catholic Church didn't want people to have the Bible. It was against the law to write a Bible. They would burn you at the stake. When they developed the printing press, and that was a great invention that really helped Christianity. But some of these guys were saying, let's print a Bible so that every plowboy will have a Bible. Do you know they burned them at the stake for doing that and said, no, they cannot have a Bible. The laity cannot have the Bible. Only the priesthood. But Martin Luther read the Bible and says, the just shall live by faith. And he said, it's by faith. It's not by works. And he began preaching this, and he began teaching this, and he lived in Germany. And so he was preaching this and teaching this, and he got students. But the Roman Catholic Church said it was heresy, and they had they brought him before them and asked him to repent and all. He wouldn't do it. But he ran, and they were trying to kill him, and they never did kill him. They never did find him. He died of old age. But he had to hide all of his life. But he wrote, and people would print it, and people began to... And that's where the Reformation... And they called them the protesters. These protesters, they're protesting against the church at Rome. And you know what word came out of that? The Protestants. So when people say... the Protestants are those that protested against Rome. And so you've had this division for hundreds of years now. But it's because the Roman Catholic Church, the mystery religion, that means there's secret things that, and there's probably secret things that we don't even know about. All the way back to the book of Genesis and to Nimrod. And it's a false religion. But the Bible says in Revelation 17, that Babylon, the mystery religion, has fallen. And one day it's going to be destroyed. I believe, and this is speculation, I believe a nuclear bomb will probably hit Rome. The Bible says Rome is a city on 7 hills, and that people are going to weep. Again, if you want real detail on this, I recommend Dave Hunt's book, The Woman Riding the Beast. It talks about she's dressed in purple. Look at the Roman Catholic Church. Look at their priests, how they dress. The Roman Catholic Church is the richest entity in all the world. They own more real estate than the U.S. government, than any business. They are the richest. The Vatican... The library at the Vatican has books that are the oldest books in all the world. They've got places in the Vatican that museums and hidden chambers where they have treasures from all over the world. The Vatican actually financed Adolf Hitler. Gave money to Adolf Hitler. And so when you study these things, and you'll see, and people talk about the Pope being a great person and all this, but if you're deceiving millions of people, how can you be a great person? And now you say, Brother Carl, I know some people that are Catholic, and I believe they're Christians. I believe Catholics can be saved. They need to get out of that church, because the Bible clearly says to get out of Babylon. And they need to get in a church that believes the Bible and teaches grace, not works. There's certain things they teach just totally contrary to the Bible. The Bible doesn't say anything about purgatory. Purgatory was invented where you can go, so if you pay enough money to the church, you can get your loved ones out. It's a way to get money. It's amazing. But anyway, that is what I believe is Mystery Babylon, and it goes back all the way to Genesis. We got about 5 minutes. Anybody got any questions about this? There's a book called Babylon Mystery Religion that you can get. Trying to think of the guy's name that wrote it. You can get online and read a lot of this. You were mentioning about the chick tracts. There's some chick tracts that deal with this. I couldn't do this a week ago. I can now scratch my head with my hand. It's amazing. I can actually take a fork and put it to my mouth. And you say, what's the big deal? Man, for 3 weeks I couldn't do that. I had to eat left-handed, and most of the food went on the table or the floor. So I'm rejoicing in that. Any questions? Yes. I think it's called The Woman Riding the Beast. The Two Babylons by Hyssop. That's a classic book. Oh, here's some chick tracts. Here's one called Why is Mary Crying? The Last Rites are Roman Catholics, Christians. Now, I'll tell you, Jack Chick is a unique guy. He may be a little bit extreme in some of his teachings and some of his things, but he'll tell it like it is. And I tell you, he gets in big trouble. There's some people that hate him. The Roman Catholic Church especially hates him. But while I don't agree with everything, I do recommend. He tells some good things and tells the truth. So we got them right back there if you want to get some of these and read them. Anyone else? Yeah. Where do you find that in the Bible? Yeah. Yeah. And they invented indulgences where you pay money to, when you sin, you give money to the church, and that appeases God and things like that. And